Minneapolis City Hall Clock Tower Terror Chapter 1. The first encounter. Minneapolis City Hall was a juxtaposition in itself. By day, it was the very emblem of civic order, a stately fortress of granite where government officials moved about with purpose, its historical architecture casting a respectable, even imposing, shadow over the streets. By night, however, the building transformed. The halls, though seemingly empty, echoed with more than just memories, and shadows danced in places where the light couldn't possibly cast them. It was a Wednesday, the middle of a particularly busy week. The hum of conversation filled the building. Employees bustled around, papers shuffled, phones rang intermittently, and footsteps resonated across the polished floors. The rhythm of modern bureaucracy was unbroken, save for the occasional glance up at the grand clock in the tower, a sentinel of time that had overseen the building's many years. Sarah Jensen, a mid-level city official, was making her way back to her office after a meeting. Distracted by thoughts of the upcoming city budget review, she was caught off guard when her shoulder violently collided with nothing. It felt as if she'd been shoved hard by an invisible force. Stumbling back, she dropped her stack of papers, scattering them like fallen leaves. A colleague rushed over. "Sarah? Are you all right?" She nodded, shaken. "Yeah, just lost my footing." But her eyes darted around, searching for something or someone that might have been responsible. Nothing. The day progressed, and the incident became just another forgotten moment in a sea of daily routines, until the afternoon, when the building's janitor, a stout man named George, found himself wrestling with a persistent water leak in the restroom on the third floor. No matter how much he mopped up, more water would appear. Curiously, he couldn't find the source. The pipes were dry, the ceilings intact. The water, oddly cold and with a faint metallic scent, seemed to be coming from nowhere. Whispers started among the employees, stories of strange occurrences in the building, papers moving on their own, cold drafts in sealed rooms, distant voices in empty halls. The more they shared, the more they realized that what they were experiencing was not just their imagination. There was something else in the hall with them. Enter Dr. Helena Cartwright, a historian with a fascination for Minneapolis hidden stories, and David Armstrong, a paranormal investigator with 2 decades of experience under his belt. They'd collaborated before on less significant sites, drawn together by their mutual respect and curiosity. When the stories from City Hall reached their ears, they were both intrigued. David set up his equipment on the first day, using the latest in electromagnetic field detectors, infrared cameras, and sound amplification tools. "If there's something here," he said with a determined glint in his eyes, "we'll find it." Helena, meanwhile, dove deep into the annals of the city's history. "Buildings," she often said, "are like books. Each one tells a story, but only if you know how to read it." She had an inkling that the present occurrences were deeply entwined with the building's past. That evening, as the city workers left and the sun dipped below the horizon, the duo prepared for their first night in what was rumored to be the most haunted place in Minneapolis. David adjusted his equipment and turned to Helena. "Ready to uncover some secrets?" he asked with a smirk. She smiled, her excitement palpable. "Let's rewrite history." In the distance, the chime of the clock tower resonated, marking the beginning of their investigation. But neither of them could have predicted what awaited them in the echoing halls of Minneapolis City Hall. Chapter 2. The building's dark past. The dim light of Helena's lantern cast eerie, flickering shadows as she descended into the archives of Minneapolis City Hall. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, illuminated by the feeble light. The subterranean chamber, long forgotten by most, was filled to the brim with old documents, boxes of records, and stacks of newspapers from bygone eras. Her fingers brushed against the leather bindings of old municipal records, brittle pages of ordinances, and stacks of photographs. But it was the newspaper clippings that intrigued her most. Spreading them out on a wooden table, she felt the weight of history settle on her shoulders. John Moshik. Helena whispered to herself, her eyes scanning an article dated 1898. The print was faded, but the anguish of the accompanying image was clear. It showed a crowd gathered around a makeshift gallows, and in the center, a man, John, with fear evident in his eyes. The articles revealed a sordid tale. John Moshik had been accused of a crime, but the details surrounding his conviction were murky at best. Eyewitness testimonies were inconsistent, evidence was circumstantial, and the general sense of the articles was that John's trial had been a rush to judgment. Despite public outcry and pleas for clemency, John was sentenced to hang. But it wasn't just the questionable conviction that made his case notorious. It was the manner of his death. On the day of his execution, something went horribly wrong. Instead of a swift end, John dangled, choking slowly, his desperate gasps for air echoing hauntingly through the hall, a morbid spectacle for all to witness. It lasted for 3 agonizing minutes, turning even the most bloodthirsty in the crowd to faces of horror. After that incident, no other hangings took place in the City Hall. But the story didn't end there. Employees and janitors from the early 20th century reported strange occurrences, faint whispers, cold breezes in enclosed spaces, and fleeting shadows, particularly on the 5th floor, where the gallows had been. Helena's lantern flickered, drawing her attention to another clipping. This one was dated a decade after John's death and detailed other deaths in the building. A construction worker named Elias, who died after falling from the clock tower. Lucy, a young typist, who was found dead in her office under unexplained circumstances. And reports of prisoners who'd mysteriously died in their cells on the 5th floor. Shivers ran down Helena's spine. The Minneapolis City Hall wasn't just the site of John Moshik's tragic death. It was a tapestry of interwoven tragedies, each leaving an indelible mark on the very stones and beams of the building. Lost in her findings, Helena was startled by a noise, a soft thud, then the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and getting closer. She looked around, hoping it was David, but there was no sign of him. Then, a cold breeze blew, extinguishing her lantern. She was engulfed in darkness. Helena held her breath, straining her ears. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a soft, rasping breath, almost like someone being strangled. Heart pounding, Helena fumbled for her matches, lighting the lantern again. The archives were empty, the footsteps gone. But on the table, spread out among her papers, was a small, noose-shaped pendant. Helena's fingers trembled as she picked it up, the chill of the metal biting into her skin. It was a haunting reminder of John Moshik's tragic end and the many souls still tethered to the building. Suddenly, David burst into the room, his face a shade paler than usual. "You won't believe what I just recorded," he whispered, holding up his audio device. But Helena was one step ahead, showing him the pendant. Their eyes met, understanding passing between them. This wasn't just another paranormal investigation. They were dealing with a building steeped in pain, anguish, and death. And they were only beginning to scratch the surface of its dark past. Chapter 3. Night in the attic. The first stars of the evening pricked the inky twilight as the team prepared for their inaugural night investigation. The vast expanse of Minneapolis City Hall loomed over them like a brooding fortress, its silhouette sharp against the dimming horizon. Helena, David, and a small crew of technicians and researchers gathered near the entrance, laden with equipment. "We need to focus on the attic tonight," Helena stated, reviewing her notes from the archives. "If the reports are accurate, that's where the majority of the activity occurs." David nodded, adjusting the microphone on his shirt. "Let's set up base camp in one of the rooms on the 5th floor. From there, we can branch out and monitor different areas." The group entered the building, the echo of their footsteps an eerie prelude to the night ahead. The air inside was cold and still, as if the building itself held its breath in anticipation. As they made their way upstairs, Helena couldn't shake off the sense of being watched. Every shadow seemed to shift, every corner concealed some unseen presence. Reaching the 5th floor, they set up their equipment. Infrared cameras, voice recorders, electromagnetic field detectors, the best tech in paranormal investigation. Once everything was in place, David suggested they head to the attic. The attic was a sprawling, cavernous space, dimly lit and filled with forgotten relics from the past. Old furniture lay draped in dusty sheets, and stacks of ancient records towered over them, bearing silent witness to the stories and secrets of the building. Helena's flashlight beam caught the edge of a statue. As she moved closer, she realized it was one of the rumored sculptures, a lifelike portrayal of a man, head tilted as if listening intently. "Look at the craftsmanship on this," she whispered, tracing her fingers along its cold stone face. "Feels almost alive." Suddenly, a cold gust swept through the attic. Helena's breath misted in front of her, and the temperature dropped noticeably. The group exchanged uneasy glances. "Did anyone leave a window open?" one of the technicians asked. David checked, but all the windows were sealed shut. The EMF detector in David's hand beeped loudly, its lights flashing wildly. "We've got something," he murmured, eyes scanning the vast room. And then it began. The statues, previously stationary, started to shift subtly. First, just a slight movement, as if settling into place. But then, more pronounced. A hand here, a head tilt there. The lifelike statue Helena had been admiring now faced her directly, its stone eyes seemingly locked onto hers. A palpable dread settled over the team. The once silent attic was now filled with the subtle scrapes of stone on wood, the gentle rustlings of old records being disturbed, and distant echoes of voices long past. Without warning, a thick, viscous substance began to drip from the ceiling. Helena reached out, her fingers coming away with a sticky, transparent residue, ectoplasm. The drips became a stream, pooling on the wooden floor, reflecting the feeble light of their torches. "This can't be happening," a technician whispered, panic evident in his voice. But the evidence was irrefutable. The very fabric of the attic was manifesting the pain, sorrow, and anguish of its tormented past. Helena, ever the researcher, tried to maintain her composure. "We need to document this. Every detail, every occurrence. We can't let fear stop us." A sudden loud crash behind them made the group jump. A large chair, previously stationary, had been violently thrown across the room, narrowly missing them. And the once quiet sculptures? Now they moved freely, their stone forms disturbingly fluid, roaming the attic, their faces etched in silent screams. David grabbed Helena's hand, pulling her towards the stairs. "We need to get out, now," he shouted over the rising cacophony. The descent down the stairs was a blur of panic and confusion. The walls seemed to close in on them, the very building resisting their escape. But eventually, they burst through the fifth-floor doors, gulping in the cool, clean air. Back in their base camp, the team was shaken, but the night's events had lit a fire in them. The Minneapolis City Hall was living up to its reputation, and they had just experienced its terrifying power firsthand. "We can't let this scare us off," David said, determination evident in his eyes. "This is just the beginning. We've got a long night ahead." As the hours passed and dawn approached, the team regrouped, sharing their experiences and findings. The events in the attic had been harrowing, but they were just scratching the surface of the building's mysteries. Helena, staring out of a window at the first light of dawn, whispered, "The City Hall has shared its dark secrets with us tonight, but there's more. We need to be ready." And as the new day dawned, the team prepared for the next chapter of their investigation, unaware of the even darker truths that awaited them. Chapter 4. Awakened spirits. Daylight poured into the Minneapolis City Hall, illuminating its grandeur, and for a brief moment, one could almost forget the haunting occurrences of the previous night. But the team, now running on adrenaline and copious amounts of coffee, knew better. They had barely scratched the surface of the mysteries that the building held. Helena pored over the notes and audio recordings from the night, searching for patterns and connections. David and a few others were in the attic, examining it in the safety of daylight. Helena's radio crackled to life. "Helena," David's voice filtered through, tinged with excitement and unease, "you need to come up here. Now." Within minutes, Helena found herself back in the vast expanse of the attic. In the light of day, it appeared less menacing. But the eeriness was palpable, the weight of centuries bearing down upon them. "What is it?" she inquired, meeting David's intense gaze. David, kneeling beside an old wooden trunk, motioned her over. As she approached, she realized that he was sifting through old, faded blueprints of the City Hall. But what caught her attention was not the blueprints themselves. It was the intricate symbols and diagrams interwoven throughout the designs. They were deliberate, purposeful, reminiscent of rituals and summonings. "These aren't just architectural designs," David whispered, almost afraid to voice the realization. "This looks like some form of ritualistic symbology. It's integrated into the very blueprint of the building." Helena's hands trembled slightly as she traced a particularly elaborate symbol, a pentagram encircled by archaic runes, positioned strategically where the attic would be. Could it be, she mused aloud, that the very design of this place was intended to channel or contain spiritual energy? David nodded grimly, and perhaps something went terribly wrong, or terribly right, depending on intent. The two were interrupted by a sudden, frantic shout from one of the researchers. Helena and David raced over to find one of the technicians, Clara, staring wide-eyed at the top of the south tower through binoculars. "There!" she exclaimed, handing the binoculars to David. "I saw something, or someone." Following her direction, David's gaze met a chilling sight. Coins, pens, sunglasses, and a myriad of other objects rained down from the tower, glittering menacingly in the sunlight as they plummeted to the ground below. The realization hit Helena with an icy dread. The spirits weren't just confined to the attic or the fifth floor. They roamed freely, wielding their anger and torment in a very tangible, dangerous manner. "We need to understand the intent behind these symbols," Helena declared, her resolve hardened. "If this building was designed as a conduit or a prison for spirits, we need to know how to appease or contain them." As the day wore on, the team divided tasks. Some began a detailed exploration of the attic, searching for more clues and symbols. Others ventured to the towers, braving the rain of objects to investigate the site. Meanwhile, Helena and David, armed with the blueprints, tried to decipher the symbology. Hours of research led them to a chilling conclusion. The symbols appeared to correspond to old pagan rituals meant to awaken and harness spiritual energy. The placement of the symbols in the building's blueprint suggested an intention to amplify this energy. The attic, with its pentagram marking, seemed to act as an epicenter. If these symbols were integrated with the intent of awakening spirits, then that could explain the heightened activity, David murmured, his brow furrowed. But it raises a bigger question. Why? Why would anyone want to deliberately stir restless souls? A hushed silence filled the room as the weight of that question sank in. The dusk outside cast long shadows, hinting at another long night ahead. Just then, the radio crackled to life, a technician's voice trembling with fear. "We've found something, beneath the attic floorboards. You need to see this." Rushing to the attic, Helena and David were met with another grim discovery. Hidden beneath the wooden planks was a small, concealed chamber. And within? An altar, covered in old, dried bloodstains, surrounded by remnants of black candles and bones. "It's a ritual site," Helena whispered, horror evident in her eyes. This wasn't just about awakening spirits. Someone was performing dark rites here, possibly sacrifices. David nodded grimly. "We're dealing with something much bigger than we anticipated. This isn't just about a haunted building. It's about dark intentions from the past bleeding into the present. And we need to find a way to stop it." As the night began its reign, the team steeled themselves. Armed with newfound knowledge and facing grave dangers, they realized their investigation had evolved into a battle against awakened spirits and the dark legacy of Minneapolis City Hall. Chapter 5. The locked stairway, the shimmering outline of dawn, filtered through the ancient windows of the Minneapolis City Hall. But any sense of comfort the light brought was overshadowed by the darkness that had descended within the hearts of the team. Helena stared at the ornate, heavily locked door that stood before them. The only known entrance to the mysterious stairway leading to the towers. A stairway that had remained locked for reasons unknown. David approached cautiously, sensing Helena's hesitation. "It's the only place we haven't explored," he said, almost in a whisper, as if afraid of who, or what, might overhear them. "I know," Helena replied, her voice barely audible. She reached into her bag and produced a set of old skeleton keys they had found earlier. One by one, they tried each key, the anticipation building with every failed attempt. And then, with a reluctant groan, the door unlocked. The stairway was dark, with only slivers of light slicing through the gaps in the stone. Each step they took echoed back eerily, amplifying their sense of isolation. As they ascended, the air grew colder, the weight of countless years pressing down on them. Clara, who had insisted on joining them despite her previous experience in the tower, suddenly grabbed Helena's arm. "Do you feel that?" Helena stopped, trying to decipher what Clara was sensing. And then she felt it too, a formidable presence, like the weight of unseen eyes watching them. A chilling gust of wind rushed down the stairs, extinguishing their torchlights. Panic set in. Clara tried to turn on her flashlight, but it flickered and went out. In the distance, they heard the soft, mocking laughter of a spectral entity. "Who are you? What do you want?" Helena called out into the darkness, her voice defiant. For a moment, there was silence. Then, an ethereal voice whispered, "Intruders." ... "Why have you come?" Helena took a deep breath, steadying herself. We want to understand. To help put to rest the souls that are trapped here." There was another pause, then a soft, malevolent hiss. "Some doors are better left unopened." The very walls seemed to pulsate with an unseen energy. Helena, David, and Clara felt an unseen force push them, urging them to leave. But they resisted, pressing onward. As they reached the top, they came across a dilapidated, dimly lit room. Amidst the debris, Helena noticed a pile of papers, old writings, yellowed with age. She carefully picked them up, realizing they were letters, scribbled in desperation. Clara, glancing over Helena's shoulder, whispered, "They're from the prisoners. The ones who were held here, long ago." Helena nodded, reading aloud. "To whoever may find this, I've been wrongfully accused and imprisoned in this tower. The walls whisper to me, voices of those long gone. I see figures, shadows. I fear my sanity is slipping. Every night, they come for me. The spirits. They revel in my fear. They're bound here by a darkness I can't comprehend. I pray for release, not just for myself, but for them too." The letters continued in a similar vein, tales of torment, sightings of apparitions, and pleas for help. Each story was a haunting testament to the terror that had unfolded within these walls. "They knew," Clara murmured, her voice quivering. "They knew about the spirits, about the rituals. They were tormented by them." David looked grim. "We need to find a way to put an end to this. For them, and for ourselves." But as they made their way back down the stairway, the spectral entity made its presence felt once more. "You cannot save them," it whispered, its voice echoing throughout the stone corridor. "They are mine." Helena, courage rising within her, shouted back, "We won't leave until we break whatever curse binds this place." The entity let out a scream, a sound of pure fury and anguish that rattled the very foundations of the building. The team raced down the stairway, praying they'd reach the bottom before the entity could manifest fully. As they emerged, gasping for breath, they knew their mission had become more perilous. The confrontation had solidified their resolve. They had come face to face with the darkness that haunted the City Hall. But they were more determined than ever to uncover the truth and find a way to break the curse. The unearthed letters, bearing the desperate pleas of the past, would be their guide. The team would piece together the puzzle, armed with the knowledge of the building's history and the first-hand accounts of its tortured souls. The spirits had awakened. The fight for redemption had truly begun. Chapter 6. The trials on Floor 5. The atmosphere inside the City Hall had shifted. No longer was it just a historic building. It had transformed into a living, breathing entity, its halls echoing with whispers of a tainted past. The team's every movement was shadowed by the weight of the unseen. Helena glanced towards the imposing door leading to Floor 5, the old courtroom. Dust motes danced in the air, and the once ornate wooden panels bore the scars of time. The room beyond that door had witnessed countless trials, but it was the unjust ones that concerned them. Armed with the court records from the building's archives, David began poring over the details of each case, searching for any indication of foul play. He soon came across a series of trials that seemed dubious, with verdicts handed down hastily without proper evidence. "Listen to this," David said, his voice hoarse, drawing the attention of Helena and Clara. In 1897, a woman named Eliza Bennett was accused of theft and without a proper trial was sentenced to death. She proclaimed her innocence until the very end. Clara shuddered. "And that's just one case?" David nodded gravely. "There are several. Cases that should have been simple, yet they ended with the most severe penalties. The knowledge that the court might have been a stage for a series of grave miscarriages of justice added another layer to the palpable tension. It was as if the walls absorbed the desperation, fear, and anger of those wrongly accused. With cameras set up, they decided to spend the night on floor 5, hoping to capture evidence of the paranormal activities they had previously experienced. Hours into the vigil, Clara's camera began to pick up unexplained phenomena. At first, it was just a flicker, a shadow passing swiftly out of frame. Then, with a startling suddenness, a stack of old papers flew into the air, scattering in all directions. The room temperature plummeted, and their breaths became visible, misting in the cold air. Helena whispered, her voice quivering, "Did you see that?" David nodded. "I did. It was like someone, or something, threw those papers in anger." Then, from Clara's camera, they heard a heart-wrenching wail, a cry of injustice that seemed to permeate from the very walls. The footage showed the ghostly apparition of a woman, presumably Eliza, her face twisted in a silent scream before vanishing. As dawn approached, the activity escalated. Chairs overturned, doors slammed shut, and ghostly figures darted across their vision. The climax came when a spectral figure, clearly visible, pounded on the judge's stand, its hollow eyes staring accusingly at the team. Helena, gathering courage, spoke directly to the entity. "Eliza? We know you were wronged. We're here to help, to tell your story." For a tense moment, everything went still. Then, in a voice that echoed with despair, the ghostly figure whispered, "Justice. Find justice." When the first rays of sunlight filtered into the room, the haunting ceased as suddenly as it had begun. The team, exhausted but resolute, knew they had their mission cut out for them. As they reviewed the footage, they realized they had captured undeniable evidence of violent poltergeist activity, proof that would shake even the staunchest skeptics. But it was not the recognition they sought. They needed to right the wrongs of the past, to bring justice to those who had been denied it. The records, combined with the footage, painted a grim picture of a courtroom that had failed in its duty, leading to the torment of countless souls. Souls that now sought retribution. But how? Helena, David, and Clara realized that to cleanse the building, they would need to delve deeper into the history of the City Hall, uncovering every dark secret and confronting the spirits that roamed its halls. For justice needed to be served, not just for the sake of the departed, but for the living who still inhabited the building. The journey was far from over, and the team prepared for the challenges ahead, determined to lay the restless souls to rest. Chapter 7. Father of the waters, the sun had set, casting an eerie twilight glow over City Hall. The day's discoveries had left the team drained, yet there was a palpable energy in the air. Floor 5 was unsettling, but what awaited them next seemed to be of a completely different magnitude. David, Clara, and Helena reconvened in the main hall, where the imposing statue named Father of the Waters stood. It was a relic from a time gone by, depicting an elderly figure with long flowing hair and robes, holding an ornate staff that was rumored to have genuine gems embedded. The statue was said to be a protector of the city and its waters, a beacon of hope in turbulent times. However, recent security footage had shown the statue moving at night. Not merely shifting or vibrating, but literally moving, its stone fingers grasping, its head turning, seemingly alive. David projected the security footage onto a screen. The room grew cold as they watched the statue's stony gaze shift, its fingers curling as if beckoning someone, or something. Helena whispered, her voice tremulous, "This is impossible." Clara, ever the historian, was deep in thought. I've come across old texts that mention Father of the Waters. There's more to it than we know. Something ancient, something cursed. The trio quickly dove into the vast archives of City Hall. There, nestled between pages yellowed by time, they found a journal from an archaeologist named Edgar Whitley, dated 1821. David read aloud, "Today, we uncovered a statue, unlike anything I've ever seen. Its aura is both regal and foreboding. Inscriptions suggest it's named Father of the Waters. Locals seem uneasy, whispering of a curse. They say the statue guards an ancient power and to move it would awaken something." Helena shivered. "That's our statue. But what is this power?" Clara responded, "If folklore is to be believed, the Father of the Waters was both a protector and a warden. It guarded against an ancient water demon, keeping it imprisoned. The curse was a means to ensure the statue remained undisturbed. But it's been here for centuries. Why move now?" David pondered aloud. They continued combing through the journal until Helena found another entry. "Despite warnings, we've decided to move the statue to City Hall. A decision I hope we don't regret." David's eyes widened. That's it. The curse wasn't about the statue moving by itself. It's about it being moved from its original spot. With the realization that the statue's relocation could have set in motion events leading to its recent animation, the team sought to decipher the curse and find a way to quell the spirit within. After hours of cross-referencing inscriptions and symbols, they pieced together the ancient chant meant to pacify the statue. "Waters rise, and spirits fall. Guardian of depths, hear our call. Bind the demon, break its might, return to stillness, end the fright." Helena, David, and Clara, with a heavy sense of duty, decided to recite the chant at midnight, when the statue was most active. As the clock struck 12, the room's temperature dropped sharply. The once still statue began to vibrate, its stony exterior cracking, revealing what looked like flowing water underneath. Gathering their courage, the team began chanting in unison. With each repetition, the statue's movements became more pronounced, the room echoing with the sounds of rushing water and distant screams. Suddenly, the statue's eyes glowed a fierce blue. A torrent of water burst forth, threatening to engulf the team. But they held firm, their voices unwavering. As they reached the final line of the chant, a deafening roar filled the room. The waters receded, and the statue, now lifeless once more, returned to its silent vigil. Exhausted, the team took a moment to catch their breath. The curse, it seemed, had been quelled, for now. Clara, looking at the now placid statue, mused, "We might have pacified it, but we need to return it to its rightful place. Only then will the curse truly be broken." The weight of their next mission was clear. City Hall held many secrets, and each layer they peeled back revealed more challenges. But with the unity of their team and the knowledge they wielded, they were determined to restore balance and ensure the safety of all. The ancient waters might have been stilled, but the ripples of their actions had just begun to spread. Chapter 8. Moonlit Secrets. The night was almost magical. An orb of gleaming silver hung in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over City Hall. But within the ancient walls of the structure, magic was the last thing on the team's mind. Ever since their encounter with Father of the Waters, the team had noticed a significant rise in paranormal activity, especially during the full moon. Helena, with her sensitive nature, felt it more acutely, a sense of something lurking, watching. The others felt it too, cold drafts where there shouldn't be any, shadows flitting in the corners of their eyes, and an ever-present sense of unease. The decision was unanimous. They would harness the power of the full moon and attempt to communicate with the spirits haunting the building. With a circle of salt, a few lit candles, and an old Ouija board, they settled in the heart of City Hall. Clara initiated the proceedings. "Spirits of this place, we seek communication. We mean no harm and only wish to understand." The planchette began to move, slowly at first, then with growing urgency. "WATCHERS, it spelled out. David's brow furrowed. "Watchers? What does that mean?" Helena's eyes fluttered shut as a vision overtook her. She saw City Hall, not as it was now, but as it had been centuries ago. A place of judgment, where innocents were condemned. She saw figures, spectral and wailing, their hands outstretched in pleading. Their eyes, however, were the most haunting, endless pits of sorrow and anger. And amidst them all stood a figure, tall and menacing, its face obscured by shadows. The vision shifted. Helena now found herself atop one of the towers of City Hall, the wind howling around her. Below, the city lay spread out, but something was wrong. The streets were flooded, and the waters were rising. The same spectral figures from her earlier vision were now pulling people under, their cries echoing in the night. Helena gasped, snapping back to the present. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. The Watchers, they're not just spirits. They're guardians. And they're angry. David, ever the skeptic, voiced his doubts. Guardians of what? And why now? Clara, her historian instincts kicking in, began piecing together the puzzle. Remember the unjust trials we uncovered? What if those souls were never meant to be condemned? And now, they've become the Watchers, ensuring that such travesties don't happen again. Helena nodded, and the figure I saw, the shadowy one. I believe he's their leader. The original Watcher. David rubbed his temples, trying to process the information. So, what do we do now? The planchette began moving again, faster this time, with a force that made the board shudder. RETURN, it spelled. Helena, her voice trembling, whispered, "Return what?" The planchette didn't move this time. Instead, the candles around the board flared up, illuminating an old, tattered document that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Clara carefully picked it up, her fingers brushing over the ancient parchment. It's a decree, from the time of the trials. It condemns a man named Alistair Gray for witchcraft. But the charges, they're fabricated. David leaned in. So, they want us to clear Alistair's name? That's how we make things right. Helena, her voice filled with certainty, said, "No. It's more than that. Alistair is the original Watcher. We need to not just clear his name, we need to free his spirit." The night had revealed its secrets. The team now had a mission, one that was more personal than ever before. The Watchers were not just remnants of the past. They were a testament to the injustices that had once taken place within the walls of City Hall. And as dawn began to break, a new resolve settled over the team. They would confront the past, right the wrongs, and in doing so, hopefully secure a more peaceful future for City Hall and its spectral inhabitants. The full moon had revealed much, but the team knew that their journey was far from over. Chapter 9. The clock tower's warning. City Hall's clock tower had always been its most prominent feature, its chimes ringing out regularly, marking the passage of time with elegant regularity. But recently, those chimes held a note of foreboding for the team. It started subtly at first, objects shifting by inches, a gust of icy wind from nowhere, faint whispers in the corridors. But these events had begun to sync eerily with the clock's tolls. Midnight chimes led to a burst of spectral energy, while the twilight tones seemed to quell the activity for a brief moment. "Has anyone else noticed the pattern?" Clara questioned one morning, pulling out a chart she had started keeping, mapping the paranormal events to the chimes. David eyed it critically. "It looks too regular and deliberate." Helena nodded in agreement. "It's as if the clock tower is warning us, setting a countdown." But for what? The team spent days poring over old blueprints of the building, historical documents, and any records they could find related to the clock tower. It was during one of these sessions that Clara stumbled across an old legend. It said that the clock tower was built over an ancient burial site, she began, and that the spirits buried there are guardians of time itself. They're not bound to the past or the future, but rather the eternal present. David frowned. "And what does that have to do with our current situation?" Helena, her voice shaking, said, "If these spirits are guardians of time, and they're warning us through the clock tower, then they're trying to tell us that time is running out. Something is coming, something that even they are wary of." The weight of the realization bore down on them. The trio felt like they were caught in a deadly game of ticking seconds, and the closer they got to deciphering the warning, the more intense the activity became. One evening, the disturbances took a terrifying turn. As the clock struck 9, a phantom wind swept through City Hall, extinguishing lights and causing papers to fly everywhere. Then, from the depths of the building came a heart-wrenching scream, a cry so full of despair and anguish that it sent shivers down their spines. The trio raced toward the sound, their flashlights casting eerie beams through the dark corridors. As they neared the tower's base, they found themselves surrounded by spectral figures, the Watchers. In their midst, a figure stood out, chained and with an aura of profound sadness. "Alistair Gray. Help. Me." Alistair's voice was a mere whisper, but the urgency in it was palpable. David stepped forward. "Alistair, what do we need to do?" The spirit's eyes, filled with centuries of pain, fixed on him. "The chimes, they toll for the city. A disaster from the past is set to repeat, and only by setting right the wrongs can it be prevented." Helena gasped, "The flood. The vision I had of the city underwater." Alistair nodded. "It's not just a vision. It's a premonition. In 3 days, when the clock strikes midnight, the city will drown unless the curse is lifted." Clara, her historian instincts kicking in, asks, "How? How do we lift the curse?" Alistair pointed to the tower. "At its top lies a relic, a dagger used in my unjust execution. It anchors the curse. Remove it, and you might stand a chance." The team had their mission, but the clock tower wasn't going to give up its secret easily. As they ascended, they faced obstacles. Phantom winds trying to push them off balance, illusions designed to mislead them, and the constant tolling of the clock, a grim reminder that time was running out. It was a race against time, but determination fueled them. And finally, they reached the top. The dagger, as Alistair described, lay embedded in the tower's central cog. As David reached out to grab it, the entire tower began to shake. "The spirits. They're resisting." Helena shouted over the cacophony. With a final pull, David managed to dislodge the dagger, and instantly, the chaos ceased. The clock's tolling fell silent, and a sense of calm enveloped them. They had done it. Or so they thought. As they made their way down, they realized that the spirit's unrest had not been out of resistance but out of a warning. The city's skies had darkened, and in the distance, they could hear the roar of approaching waters. They had appeased the spirit, but had they done it in time to prevent the impending doom? The weight of their mission, the urgency of the clock tower's warning, and the fate of an entire city now rested squarely on their shoulders. The countdown had begun, and every chime was a step closer to destiny. Chapter 10. The binding ritual. The roar of the looming deluge grew louder with every passing moment. The sky, dark and foreboding, loomed over the city as an omen of the impending catastrophe. In the heart of the chaos, inside the city hall, the team was frantically searching for answers. "Every action has an equal and opposite reaction," Clara said, her voice shaky. "We may have lifted the curse, but we also unleashed the pent-up energy of all those spirits." Helena pointed at an ancient leather-bound tome she had uncovered from the city's archives during their research. "Here, look at this. The Book of Echoes. It contains rituals from times past, designed to communicate with, appease, or bind spirits." Without wasting a moment, the trio began poring over the book's dusty pages, searching for a solution to the growing supernatural storm around them. It was David who stumbled upon a passage titled Ritual of Binding. "The ritual of binding," he read aloud, "is a sacred rite used to tether restless spirits to an object, thereby containing their energy and preventing them from wreaking havoc upon the living." "That's it," exclaimed Clara. "We bind them, tether them, and maybe, just maybe, that might stop the disaster from happening." The ritual required specific materials: an object belonging to the spirit, a circle of salt, 5 black candles, and an incantation that needed to be recited at the stroke of midnight. The dagger from the clock tower would serve as Alistair Gray's object, and thankfully, the other materials were available in City Hall's repository of historical artifacts. The city's bell tolled 11, giving them only an hour. They set up in the grand hall beneath the clock tower, drawing a large salt circle on the floor. At its center lay the ancient dagger, its blade reflecting the candlelight. Each black candle was positioned at precise points around the circle. As midnight approached, the atmosphere grew dense. Shadows flitted across walls, ghostly whispers filled the air, and the temperature dropped precipitously. "Remember," Helena cautioned, her breath visible in the cold air, "once we begin, we cannot stop. No matter what happens, we must complete the incantation." Each took a deep breath, mentally preparing for the challenge ahead. And as the clock began its midnight chime, they started the incantation, their voices merging into a haunting chorus. "Spirits of old, spirits untold, hear our plea, and to this relic be thee bound. In this circle, by salt and fire, your energies contained, your chaos expired." The room vibrated with energy. The candles' flames danced wildly, reaching impossible heights, and the shadows grew darker and more aggressive, encroaching on the circle's boundary. Suddenly, a blast of cold air extinguished the candles. The room plunged into pitch-black darkness, interrupted only by the glowing salt circle. A wail, a symphony of countless lost souls, echoed through City Hall, growing louder and more desperate. "We need to relight the candles," David shouted, struggling to be heard over the cacophony. But before they could act, a tremendous force slammed against the salt barrier, causing cracks to appear. The spirits were resisting, fighting against the binding. Panicking, Clara grabbed a lighter from her pocket and frantically attempted to reignite the candles. One by one, they flickered to life, their flames feeble but holding. With renewed determination, the team resumed the incantation, pouring all their energy and belief into the words. As they reached the chant's climax, the dagger levitated, spinning rapidly in the air, becoming a vortex of energy. But then, disaster struck. Just as they were on the verge of completing the ritual, one of the candles toppled over, breaking the salt circle. Instantaneously, the dagger crashed to the ground, and an explosive force of energy knocked them off their feet. Silence. As they regained consciousness, they realized the ritual had failed. Not only that, but the paranormal activity had intensified. Objects floated eerily, ghostly apparitions appeared more solid, and the very foundation of City Hall trembled. David, his face pale, whispered, "We've made it worse." Helena, despair evident in her eyes, responded, "We have one more chance. We can attempt the ritual again, but we need to make sure it's foolproof." Amidst the growing supernatural tempest, the team knew they were racing against time. The spirits were stronger, angrier, and the city's doom grew closer with every passing moment. Their next attempt had to succeed. There would be no other chances. The stakes had never been higher, and as they braced for their final stand against the restless spirits of City Hall, they knew that the fate of the entire city rested in their hands. Chapter 11. Deeper Connections. The vast archival room of City Hall, a realm of the forgotten past, beckoned Helena. She had come here searching for solutions to the paranormal disturbances, but now found herself drawn to a dusty corner. A box, seemingly untouched for decades, sat atop a pile of old records. A hand-painted label read, "Private, property of the mayor's office, 1922. Helena felt an inexplicable pull towards it. As she opened the box, a puff of dust clouded the air, revealing a collection of black and white photographs. Her heart skipped a beat as she picked up the first picture. It depicted a young woman, strikingly similar to Helena, standing in front of the City Hall. The caption below read, "Eleanor Witherspoon, 1922. Doubt and intrigue warred within Helena. Witherspoon was her grandmother's maiden name, a woman of many secrets and who rarely spoke of her past. Could this young woman, this doppelganger of Helena, be her great-grandmother? Flipping through more photos, Helena's emotions swung from shock to curiosity. There were pictures of Eleanor in the company of a man with piercing eyes and a sharp jawline, looking every inch the passionate lover. In another, Eleanor was seen holding a small child, with City Hall serving as a looming backdrop. Amidst the photographs, Helena found a leather-bound journal. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but the script was meticulous. It was Eleanor's diary. Tales of love, ambition, betrayal, and supernatural events unfolded as Helena delved deeper into the journal. Eleanor had been in love with a man named Alistair Gray. But their love was forbidden due to societal differences. Desperate to be together, Eleanor and Alistair dabbled in dark arts, seeking a way to be united forever. They performed rituals in the clock tower, harnessing its power. A sickening realization dawned on Helena. The disturbances, the clock tower's importance, it was all connected to her ancestors. One entry stood out, dated just days before Eleanor's mysterious disappearance. "Alistair and I attempted the ritual of unity last night. We hoped to blend our souls, ensuring we'd be together beyond death. But something went wrong. There's a presence now in City Hall, angry and vengeful. I fear we have unleashed something we cannot control." As Helena read, she felt a chill sweep over her. The room grew colder, and shadows danced menacingly. A whisper, a voice eerily reminiscent of her own, echoed, "You shouldn't be here." Swallowing hard, Helena turned to face a ghostly apparition, Eleanor. She looked just as she did in the photographs, but was translucent and her eyes held an eternal sadness. "Why have you disturbed me?" Eleanor's voice was soft, melancholic. I didn't know. I wanted to help," Helena stammered, fighting back tears. Eleanor's figure wavered as if struggling to maintain form. "Our family's past is linked with this place, bound by chains of actions and consequences. Your presence here reawakens the ties. The curse Alistair and I began, you have the power to end." A surge of determination bolstered Helena. "Tell me how. Tell me what I must do." "The ritual of unity was our doom," Eleanor replied. "But there's a way to reverse it. You possess my blood, my legacy. You can use it to set things right. But be warned, the ritual demands a sacrifice." The weight of Eleanor's revelation threatened to crush Helena. Her family's legacy, her connection to the supernatural events, and the daunting task ahead were overwhelming. However, the thought of the city's impending doom and her friend's safety spurred her forward. Emerging from the archives, Helena shared her discovery with Clara and David. They listened in rapt attention, the gravity of the situation evident on their faces. "Your past might be the key to our future," David mused. Clara added, "We need to perform the ritual and end this once and for all." Helena nodded, her resolve strengthened. "Together, we can set things right." As the trio began preparations, they were acutely aware that the clock was ticking, both figuratively and literally. With every chime from the tower, the spirits grew restless and the pressure mounted. In her ancestral connection, Helena found both pain and purpose. She was ready to confront personal traumas, to delve deep into her lineage's dark history, and to stand strong against the malevolent forces threatening the city. But the question remained: what sacrifice would the ritual demand, and would Helena be willing to pay the price? The climax of their supernatural battle was imminent, and the City Hall's secrets were about to be laid bare. Chapter 12. Desperation and doubt. The evening shadows in the vast corridors of City Hall grew deeper, more threatening. The massive structure, with its long history of dark events, seemed to breathe with malevolence. The chilling whispers from unseen entities echoed through its hallways, whispering promises of despair and doom. Helena, Clara, and David sat around a makeshift table, littered with Eleanor's journal, handwritten notes, old photographs, and a collection of talismans and charms they hoped would provide protection. The once cohesive team was now a triad of tense, anxious individuals, each grappling with their own internal battles. David, the hard-nosed paranormal investigator who always seemed so sure, now had beads of sweat forming on his brow. He kept replaying the previous night's events, when a spirit had hissed his daughter's name, reminding him of the dangers he faced and those he left behind every time he delved into the supernatural. Clara, usually so composed and rational, seemed to be fragmenting in front of them. Earlier that day, she'd seen a vision of her younger self, alone, abandoned, echoing her deepest insecurities from a childhood spent in foster homes. And Helena, who had only just discovered her deep-rooted connection to the heart of the disturbance, felt the weight of her ancestors' mistakes pressing down on her. Eleanor's apparition, the warnings, and the impending ritual's potential sacrifice plagued her mind. Clara broke the stifling silence. I saw her again. My younger self. Alone in the corridors. It's playing with us, with our fears. David cleared his throat, trying to regain his usual confidence. It knows our weaknesses, and it's trying to break us. But we have to stay strong, for each other and for the city. Helena's voice trembled as she spoke. It's my family's curse. Maybe, Maybe it's best if I face it alone. Clara reached out, grabbing Helena's hand. No, this is bigger than you or any of us individually. We need to be united. As they tried to rally, the lights began to flicker. The temperature in the room plummeted, and a chill wind seemed to emanate from the very walls. An invisible force swept the papers and photographs off the table, scattering them like autumn leaves. David stood abruptly, pointing towards the window. A shadowy figure stood outside, its form barely discernible against the darkness, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. It seemed to beckon them, challenging them to come forth. We need to face it, confront it. Together, he declared, his voice laced with newfound determination. But Helena was frozen in place. A voice, Eleanor's voice, whispered in her ear, the sacrifice. It's too great. Desperation settled over them. Clara, her face ashen, murmured, maybe. Maybe we're not equipped for this. Perhaps it's best if we abandon the investigation. David turned sharply. You can't be serious, Clara. After all we've seen, all we've uncovered, you want to just leave? Tears welled in Clara's eyes. I'm scared, David. For the first time in my life, I'm truly terrified. Not just for myself, but for all of us. And for you, Helena. What if this sacrifice is more than we can bear? The weight of Clara's words hung heavily in the room. Helena, battling with her own inner turmoil, finally spoke. If any of you want to leave, I won't hold it against you. This curse, this responsibility, it's mine. I can't ask you to face it with me. David, battling his own internal demons, sighed deeply. We started this together, and we will see it through. But Clara's right. This isn't like our past investigations. The entity knows us, our histories, our fears. It's personal. There was a long, weighted pause. Then Clara, wiping her tears, said, I don't want to leave. But I need to know we're in this together, that we have each other's backs. Helena nodded, always. David looked at both women, his comrades, his friends, together. Yet, in the back of their minds, doubt lingered. The entity was growing stronger, feeding off their fears. And as the clock tower struck midnight, the three of them knew that the darkest hours, both literally and figuratively, were still to come. Chapter 13. Unexpected allies. After the challenging events of the previous night, the team found themselves in one of the grand, eerily beautiful rooms of City Hall. Helena was deep in thought, while Clara attempted to meditate, searching for any spiritual connection. David, leaning against an old wooden desk, sifted through various ancient documents, seeking any piece of relevant information. It was Helena who first noticed it. The soft, lilting whisper that floated through the room. At first, it seemed like the wind, but when the whispered words became more distinct, she raised her hand, signaling for silence. Injustice. Wronged. Help. ... The whispering grew louder, echoing through the chamber, until three spectral figures materialized before them. All dressed in period clothing, each bore the marks of suffering, ropes around their necks, chains on their wrists, and a deep sadness in their eyes. Helena stepped forward cautiously. Who are you? The middle specter, a woman with a stern yet kind face, spoke first. I am Abigail. These are Thomas and Elise. We were falsely accused, wrongly convicted, and our lives were stolen from us within these very walls. David's eyes widened. We've read about you. The innocent souls wronged by a corrupt justice system. Elise, a younger woman with raven black hair, nodded, tears streaming down her translucent cheeks. They labeled me a witch because I knew of herbs and the old ways. I only wanted to help, but they feared me. Thomas, a rugged man, his ghostly chains clinking, added, I was a carpenter, accused of theft. But the real thief was the judge's own son. Helena's voice trembled. Why are you here now? Abigail answered, the malevolent force you face has trapped us here, feeding off our anguish and despair. But we wish to help you. Together, we might find a way to release all the tormented souls of this hall, including our own. As Abigail spoke, the team started to experience intense, shared visions. Scenes of past trials, kangaroo courts, and mob justice played out. They saw Abigail, speaking out against the local lord's tyranny, only to be silenced. They watched as Elise was dragged away by a mob, her pleas of innocence ignored. And they witnessed Thomas being beaten and thrown into a dark cell for a crime he didn't commit. The visions were interspersed with fleeting glimpses of rituals, incantations, and hidden chambers within City Hall, clues to harnessing the energy necessary to combat the malevolent force. As the visions subsided, Clara, disoriented, said, it's not just about banishing the entity, but about righting the wrongs, acknowledging the innocence. Helena, her eyes ablaze with newfound determination, agreed. We need a strategy that incorporates both. Fight the dark force, yes, but also honor and release the spirits wronged. David, always the strategist, began forming a plan. We gather relics, objects linked to each spirit. We perform a ritual to both acknowledge the innocent and banish the malevolent. Abigail nodded. The relics will be our anchors, our connection to your world. But you must be cautious. The entity will do everything to stop you. Elise spoke up. In the basement, under the old well, there's a chamber. My grimoire, filled with the old ways, is hidden there. It might be of help. Thomas added, in my old workshop, now sealed behind the walls, is my carpenter's square. It represents my life, my honor. Abigail's eyes shimmered with tears. Find the pendant my daughter gave me. It's my anchor, my reminder of love. David took charge. We split up, find the relics, and then regroup. Once we have them, we'll prepare for the ritual. The spirits faded, their final whispers echoing words of hope and gratitude. The room, though still filled with the weight of history, felt different, less oppressive, more hopeful. Clara sighed. We were losing our way, but now, with these unexpected allies, we might have a chance. Helena agreed. We were chosen for this mission for a reason. We must believe in ourselves, in each other. David's resolve was firm. We have the knowledge, the tools, and now, allies from the other side. It's time to finish this. Their path was clear. With the guidance of their newfound allies and the weight of history on their shoulders, they set out to bring peace to City Hall and justice to the spirits trapped within. The clock was ticking, and the climax of their confrontation with the malevolent force was rapidly approaching. Chapter 14. The final night. The evening draped City Hall in a shroud of shadows, the ancient stone walls echoing with a chorus of whispered secrets. With each relic safely gathered, the team found themselves in the heart of the grand courtroom, transformed into a ceremonial chamber with chalked circles and glowing candles. A heavy weight of anticipation hung in the air. Helena, her features drawn, whispered, "This is it. Everything we've been through, all that we've learned, it all comes down to this moment." David, setting up a tripod for the camera, nodded. We get one shot. If we fail tonight, the malevolent spirit will become even stronger, and all may be lost. Clara, clutching the grimoire Elise had directed them to, began chanting in a voice that was eerily serene, each word echoing with the weight of the past. As her voice rose, the atmosphere grew electric, and the relics placed in the center of the circle began to glow faintly. And then, as suddenly as it had started, there was silence. A chilling wind rushed through the chamber, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into darkness. Out of the abyss, a voice boomed, bitter and filled with rage. "Why do you persist, mortals? This is my domain." The team's flashlights flickered to life, revealing the towering specter of John Moshik. His form, ethereal and shifting, was a swirl of darkness and pain. His eyes, deep voids of sorrow and anger, locked onto the group, and his voice dropped to a venomous hiss. "You dare to bind me?" Helena, holding her ground, replied, "We're here to restore balance, John. To release the spirits unjustly trapped and to free you from your eternal torment." A mirthless laugh echoed. "Freedom? I have no desire for freedom. This hall, its suffering, its pain, is my power. And you think a simple ritual can stop me?" David, his voice quivering but resolute, said, "We know your story, John. The betrayal, the false accusations. We want to help you find peace." John's spirit wavered, a flash of vulnerability piercing through. Peace? After all they did? They deserve to suffer. Clara stepped forward, her voice filled with empathy. "They're gone, John. The ones who wronged you are long dead. The souls here now are victims, just like you." The spirit of Abigail appeared, along with Thomas and Elise. "John," Abigail implored, "you were once a man of honor, a beacon in this community. Don't let their betrayal define your eternity." John Moshik's spirit roiled, torn between anger and the plea of the innocent souls before him. "They took everything from me. My name, my life, my family." Helena whispered, "And now, it's time to take it back. Not through vengeance, but through redemption." A tense silence fell, broken only by the distant chime of the clock tower. As midnight approached, the team braced themselves. The ritual had to be performed exactly at the 12th chime. As the first chime resonated, Clara began the binding chant. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the very walls vibrating. Helena and David, holding hands, joined in, their combined voices growing in strength. With each successive chime, the relics glowed brighter. John's spirit, conflicted and tormented, fluctuated between rage and sorrow. As the final chime rang out, a blinding light erupted from the circle, engulfing John's spirit and the entire room. The force was so intense that the team was thrown backward. When the light dimmed, the room was transformed. The oppressive weight was gone, replaced by a tranquility they hadn't felt since their arrival. But at the center of the circle, where the relics once lay, was an empty space save for a single, tattered photograph, a memento of John Moshik's family. David, tears streaming down his face, whispered, "It's over. We did it." Helena, clutching the photograph, added, "But at a cost." She gazed at the spot where Clara had stood, now eerily vacant. She knew the sacrifice she'd have to make. Abigail's spirit, now radiant and free of pain, appeared once more. "You've set us free. The balance has been restored." She glanced at the empty space beside her, where Clara's spirit now stood, smiling softly. "And she will be honored among us, a guardian of this place." As dawn broke, casting a golden hue over City Hall, the team, heartbroken yet resolute, exited the grand building. They had faced the depths of horror, touched the annals of history, and through sacrifice, had emerged triumphant. But City Hall, though Chapter 15, Aftermath, as the sun stretched its rays over the horizon, a once tumultuous City Hall now stood serene and majestic, a testament to the trials it had witnessed and endured. Birds chirped, their melodies filling the air, as if nature itself was singing a song of rebirth and redemption. Inside, where shadows had once danced with malevolence, the golden sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting a tapestry of colors onto the worn floors. The grandeur of the hall, once suffocated by the weight of its tormented past, seemed to breathe freely once more. David, with bags under his eyes, packed up their equipment. As he coiled wires and stored devices, the weight of Clara's absence bore down on him. Beside him, Helena sat, holding the tattered photograph they had found. It was as if she was attempting to etch every detail of it into her memory. "I can't believe she's gone," Helena whispered, her voice catching in her throat. David looked up, his gaze filled with a mixture of sorrow and admiration. She knew the risks. Yet she pushed on, for the souls trapped here, and for us. "She's a hero, Helena." A distant chime from the clock tower, a now gentle reminder of the passage of time, resonated through the hall. They both looked up at it, a symbol of their hard-fought victory. "It's time to go," David said softly. "There's nothing more we can do here." As they made their way to the exit, Abigail's spirit appeared one last time, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered before slowly fading away, leaving Helena and David alone in the now tranquil corridor. Outside, the team's van was waiting. Marcus, the tech analyst, was already inside, poring over the data and footage they had captured. He looked up as they approached, his face a mask of exhaustion. "It's all here," he said, holding up a drive. "Every moment, every encounter. Clara's legacy." David nodded. "We'll ensure the world knows what happened here and the sacrifice made to bring peace to these souls." The journey back to their base was silent, each member lost in their thoughts, replaying the events of the past week. The city around them continued with its usual hustle and bustle, oblivious to the spiritual warfare that had transpired within its heart. At their headquarters, the team gathered one final time. Helena, her eyes red from crying, held up a toast. "To Clara, our brave friend. May she find the peace she helped bring to others." They clinked their glasses, a somber moment of remembrance. Days turned into weeks, and as the dust settled, the team went their separate ways. The weight of the City Hall investigation had changed them, forging bonds that could never be broken, but also revealing scars that would take time to heal. David ventured into academia, sharing their findings and ensuring that the true history of City Hall was taught to the next generation. Helena, on the other hand, withdrew from the public eye, dedicating herself to studying ancient rituals and their impact on the spiritual world. But the city, ever changing and expanding, held other secrets. Deep in the old industrial district, workers on a new construction site stumbled upon an ancient well. And as its stone lid was removed, a gust of cold, malevolent air escaped, hinting at another entity awakened and waiting in the shadows. In a dimly lit room, a phone rang. Helena picked it up, her heart racing as the voice on the other end relayed the unsettling news. "It seems our work is far from over," she whispered, a new resolve burning in her eyes. The team, though forever changed, would unite once more, for the city's shadows held tales yet untold. We hope you have enjoyed our storytelling offering tonight. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted of future weekly additions to our collections. Paranormal Untold Stories.